Welcome to this week's Two Men in the Middle. This was two men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics, current events, and other fun stuff. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
Well, Brandon, first off, let me apologize to all the listeners. Our audio file quality was a little bit bad last week. That was my fault. There's about 4 buttons I need to press, and if one of those aren't pressed correctly, I'm completely out of my sound engineering element, and we got past my technical capabilities that last week, but I think we got that solved now. This week, there's really only one thing to talk about, and that is the 4th indictment of Donald Trump. This is Fani Willis, not Fannie Willis, out of Georgia. This is the big one. This is the RICO case with Trump and 18 of his pals. This gives us names like Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, John Eastman. All of the cast of characters are there. And it looks like Fani Willis is just trying to wrap her arms around that entire group, slap a RICO charge on them, which basically means they formed a criminal organization in Atlanta, and charge them and try them all at the same time.
That's exactly right. So this is a 41-count indictment, 98-page long indictment, so twice as long as the indictment from Jack Smith on the federal side. This brings the total number to 98 criminal charges against Donald Trump, if you're counting with the 4 indictments that are circulating. And this one packs quite a punch. As you mentioned, the RICO statute gives broad authority to a prosecutor to really target multiple people that are involved under the guise of a criminal enterprise. And so that RICO statute has long been used to go after organized crime, mafia, as well as like lower level like drug dealers and gangs based on people who may even have been passive participants, but who were part of that overall goal or effort. And Fani Willis has actually used that RICO statute to prosecute gangs and other enterprises. So she's not new to employing this.
Her big case was that when she used it with a teacher scandal in Atlanta.
Scandal.
There was a cheating scandal, and she wrapped them all up in a RICO account.
And was it? She went after a rapper recently too.
She's gone after some pretty high profile cases and won these cases.
She has, and I think it's good reminding people too. She is actually a pretty tough on crime prosecutor. She was kind of known as a centrist when she was running in the Democratic primary in Fulton County. She was actually criticized for being too Republican-like at the time, but she does know her stuff. And this is what's good about this too is not only the RICO statute as it exists gives us authority where it doesn't exist elsewhere. Georgia in particular has a version of the RICO statute that's very robust and gives a lot of deference to prosecutors. And we'll get more into Georgia as a state plays a lot into this because their legal framework enables, I think, for not only robust prosecution, but also for Trump to not evade these charges behind the power of the presidency, as he would be able to do federal charges. Yeah. So that's another facet of all of this.
Well, the governor, Kemp, can't pardon him either.
That's
like
right.
A
Georgia
4-person board that
is
has
one
to
of the
do it.
only states that doesn't have a gubernatorial pardon. And as you mentioned, it's a 4-person board, state board of pardons and paroles. And not only that, that board cannot issue a pardon until 5 years after a defendant has served out their sentence.
And you have to serve at least 2/3 of your sentence to be eligible for it.
So there's no question that there's going that a pardon won't make a difference here in terms of where it would on the federal level, where a pardon could be issued in even before the prosecution or before a verdict. The other item to note is that the RICO statute as well, there's a minimum sentence of 5 years. So none of these people are going to be getting off lightly, and it provides incentive for a lot of these co-conspirators and others to work with the prosecution and turn on Trump.
Yeah, but I heard something where Sarah is going to point this out, that where it's like a minimum sentence, but that's not the mandatory sentence.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. It is a minimum, but it's worth saying that matters because even if you go back to like the Alvin Bragg's case, that could easily result in no jail time at all, like a fine.
But so how I read that is, if convicted, he could get a sentence of 2 years. Is that how?
So that's different than what I thought. I thought it was
that if you give it, you have to give the 5.
No, I thought if you give it, you have to give the 5. I think there's no way around that minimum 5 years.
I thought I heard something different that was the minimum, but it wasn't the mandatory. So maybe there was some more flexibility there.
There might.
Either way, this is Trump's most in jeopardy of going to jail.
Yeah, because he can't evade state-level charges. And then, thank goodness for Georgia, they don't have, gubernatorial pardon power. And I did not know that. I figured virtually all states did. They were one of the few that do not.
Yeah, I figured Kemp would just say, hey, just get done with the trial as soon as you can, and I'll just pardon you, and we'll just put this beside us. Or is Trump past that in Georgia? I mean, Georgia's pretty done with Donald Trump.
I think they are. In Georgia, Republicans in particular, you have to also remember that Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, is a cooperating witness in this case, as is the former lieutenant governor, or current lieutenant governor, actually, not former, sorry. Current Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, as well, is cooperating. So the Republican establishment in Georgia as it exists is pretty much over Trump. And Brian Kemp even fought back on Twitter X this week.
I saw that.
Rebutting Trump's claims about the election being stolen in Georgia.
And the Republican Party in Georgia is not what it used to be. The evidence of that is you have 2 Democratic senators out of Georgia. And that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago.
That is correct. You not only have 2 Democratic senators, you have 2 Democratic senators,
2 liberal, progressive Democratic senators.
One of whom has already...
These aren't John Tester.
One of whom won in a special election and has already won re-election last year. So he was returned to power, Raphael Warnock.
Yes. Thank you, Herschel Walker.
Yeah, and of course, Georgia went blue on the presidential level. So Georgia is demographically is a state that's in flux and is becoming bluer and is really a purple state now. It is no longer a red state, just like Arizona.
So there's a couple of things about this that I've been thinking of and I think are really interesting. It's a 100-page indictment. It's RICO law. There's no way amateur podcast or professional pundits can go through this with any level of expertise. So as usual, you got to find your 3 or 4 lawyer podcast and get most of your good data from them. And I'm going to recommend the 3 that I always have. And whenever I recommend lawyer podcasts, you got to pick the other side. You can't pick your own team. You got to hear this from people that you trust that don't have your political perspective. So mine are David French, Sarah Isger, and Andy McCarthy. And they're all lawyers. And if you listen to a lot of lawyer podcasts, it's weird in that if the law and the facts of the case don't perfectly overlay each other, they all kind of freak out. So lawyers like it when the facts and the evidence just automatically lay over each other. And anytime there's any gray area, that's the spaces that lawyers live in, and that's the area that there's the most debate. The debate's around what is fraud. Is it a fraud on the U.S. government to keep Donald Trump from gaining the presidency? The Supreme Court in its latest iterations have said no, that is not fraud. So there is some wiggle room. There is some debate on what these charges are across all 3 of the major indictments. We're not going to include Bragg in this because that's something different. Yeah. And while they all may find areas to argue and areas of wiggle and areas of concern, all of them will tell you Trump's getting convicted. There are certain parts of this that there are just no way out of. The obstruction stuff on all 3 of them, for example.
Oh, yeah.
There are parts of this that are going to get overturned. The issue that I have right now when you hear a lot of pundits and a lot of lawyers talk about this, it's almost like they're talking about the appeal. You know, it's becoming a foregone conclusion that the government doesn't go 0 for 91 or 0 for 98 or how many charges there are. With the state charges in the mix with the federal charges, it doesn't matter what. Some of this will get dismissed, some of this will get overturned on appeal, but Trump is going to get convicted of some of these crimes is the general consensus.
Without a doubt, and the law of averages kind of plays that out. But in some of these cases, like if I were to rank the cases by probability in terms of most likely to be convicted on down, number 1, I would say the Mar-a-Lago case, because that's pretty cut and dry. Yep. And number 2, I would probably place this case, the Fulton County, the recordings, the evidence. Number 3, I would place the January 6th case, just because good likelihood, but it is a little bit more nebulous with the charges and trying to string that case together with the insurrection. And then lastly would be the Alvin Bragg case, which I think is the weakest.
I mean, in this case, you have Eastman. I think he's either on tape or in I think this is in an email, him saying, hey, look, guys, we already are in violation of the law. We've already broke the Electoral Count Act. What we're doing now, yes, it's illegal, but it's not as illegal as what we just did, so we might as well just go ahead and go.
Yeah.
There are parts of this where the people involved in the criminal conspiracy just say, yep, we're in it.
Yeah.
We're doing crime. That's what we're doing.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because I think there's an opportunity here to really tell the story in a way the other cases don't, because the other cases are so focused on very specific actions or aspects of what happened. The January 6th case is very much relegated to the days and weeks leading up to that cataclysmic event. You have Mar-a-Lago, which, again, is a very separate, distinct issue from the election interference. This election interference gets to the heart of the strategy and what they attempted to do, not only in Georgia but elsewhere. And I think the interesting thing is with RICO statute, it allows the prosecutor, Fonnie Willis, to bring in characters and events that occurred outside of the state as well. And RICO allows you to go across state and look at and bring in that as evidence as part of that wide-ranging conspiracy.
And that's what Fonnie Willis said she likes about how Georgia has set up their RICO law, because what she's going to be able to do now is to paint a full picture.
Right.
She's going to be able to point to this is how Trump's actions and his words set up Rudy Giuliani, who then took these actions based on what he heard Trump say. Then here's how that impacted Sidney Powell, and here's how they were all working together.
That's exactly right. And for those who haven't read through her indictment, there's three main planks or themes. They're all relating to election interference. Number one is the undue pressure on lawmakers to overturn the result. So the pressure campaign put on state lawmakers to basically not certify the vote.
Well, and you've got that woman and her daughter who were volunteers.
Yes, and I'm glad
you
because
put
they
those
get brought
two
back
on the
onto
stand.
The story. Yeah.
That's a compelling story.
Very compelling story because their lives were shattered with these false allegations of vote rigging by Trump and by Giuliani. And I mean, they had to flee their home. Their home was invaded. Yep. They had to change their names for a time. So those two, I think it's good to be reminded because that is a story that needs to be retold. Number two, as far as election interference, is the attempt to basically seat a slate of false Trump electors.
Yeah.
That's a whole facet to this. So some of the people caught up in this indictment are Georgia GOP state officials who were involved in the
30
effort.
of them.
Oh, yeah. Who part of this conspiracy to get this slate of fake Trump electors seated so that they could cast their votes for Trump instead of Biden. And then the third plank is the active attempt to actually to hack into voting machines. So this was another part of the story, which I'm glad is being told because this is not in the case that Jack Smith is bringing, but Coffee County, Georgia, which is a rural county of just about a little bit over 40,000 people. Their election administrator, who apparently had a lot of sympathy for Trump, invited the Trump campaign to directly access those voting machines, which is a violation of state law and a just momentous, cybersecurity hack.
Just because they invited you didn't mean you should do it.
No.
It doesn't make it legal.
Not at all. It was completely illegal. And it's part of this as well. And so there's people that are caught up in that, including that election administrator. And it also reminds people that under the deluge of these allegations of basically fake election results and rigged election, it's so ironic that you actually had Trump officials that accessed voting machines illegally and were basically have been accused of doing what they claim was done by the Biden campaign.
Yeah,
you can't make this up.
We're past that. Oh, this is just all free speech. Yeah, we're past some of the baseline arguments that started coming out when Jack Smith when he launched the J6 indictment. Now here, if you're still listening to sources that are telling you this is a violation of Trump's First Amendment rights and that's how these are going to get overturned, you've got the wrong legal sources. You need to find different people to listen to,
and you need to follow the story and read the indictment about what actually occurred, because this is much more than about speech. It's about an active plot, an attempt to access information illegally, to unduly influence, and to seat electors contrary to the Constitution. So that, I think, is all important, because those are details that people may have heard in passing via the January 6th committee, but this is a way to tell that story more concretely and in terms of the impact on Georgia. And it's going to have just, I think, a lot of impact in terms of people understanding that this was an attempt, a conspiracy that wasn't just residing in the brains of these individuals, but was actually executed. It was executed, and while it was not successful, it doesn't mean that it was any less dangerous.
I was trying to whip up a joke that I got my law degree from Dick Wolf University or Law and Order U or something, because my legal background consists of 25 years of watching all the Law and Order franchise stuff.
There's been so many.
So if Law and Order has taught me anything, it's in RICO you charge everybody, knowing that half the people are going to flip on the other half of the people.
And we should remind, in case people haven't been following, some names have resurfaced that we haven't heard from in a long time, like Sidney Powell.
Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, Jenna Ellis.
So Rudy allegedly, like 2 months ago, went down to Mar-a-Lago with his lawyer and said, hey, Trumples, I need some money. I am out of cash, and I mean, legal bills are mounting up. You've got to help me. And Trump said no and wouldn't do it. That may come back to bite Trump straight in the ass.
Oh, yeah.
Rudy Giuliani is a ghoulish figure in this,
completely.
just brutal, and all of the memes with his hair dye running down, that just awful. Brandon, just so maybe some of the kids listening will believe me on this, Rudy Giuliani one time was one of the most widely respected men in America. And it was well earned after 9/11. I mean, Rudy Giuliani was
America's mayor on the front page of Time magazine.
He was somebody who people trusted, respected, and you could point to that guy and say, that guy's done a lot.
Yeah.
Cleaned up New York City. He held it together after 9/11. That's a guy that when he dies, statues need to go up around New York City of that guy. Where I am sympathetic to Rudy Giuliani, Brandon, as you get older, specifically too, I think this applies to a lot of men, you start realizing there's a certain time when, hey, your skill set just wasn't what it used to be. You know, if you're a lawyer or an IT professional or marketing, there comes a point in time when you've been out of the business for a while and you're just not as relevant as you used to be. And if you've had a hold of that ring of power at some point in time, as you age, giving it up has got to be a bitch. I can sympathize with all of those things. None of that gives him the excuse to do what he has done the past 2.5 years.
Well, and I also wonder, and it's not an excuse at all, but cognitive decline has also happening here. But this was a guy, this is what floors me, Craig. This was a guy, too, not only his leadership of after 9/11, but he had a just amazing career as a federal prosecutor going after mob bosses and organized crime.
All are really get a good old chuckle out of this, that now Rudy's got to go down with RICO.
Which is the statute he used to go after the mob.
That he invented.
So, I mean, he used the same tactics that he went after others for. I mean, it's like coming full circle. How does that happen to somebody?
I sit there as I approach, I'm not old yet, but I'm staring it right in the face. And as I approach this, things like that give me pause. Then I realize that could never happen to me. That could never happen to me because I have people around me who care about me, love me, and would pull me out of that thing and say, listen, you're not going to do this. And that's really the tragedy, I think, of Rudy and Sidney and this whole kind of gang. These are just broken people.
They're broken people
who have nobody around them at the time they needed it the most to say, Brandon, you're off the rails. Let me pull you back. They've alienated or gotten rid of anybody in their life that could have done that. And when they needed that the most, it wasn't there.
Right. Well, I think the people that are most likely to tell them they're unwilling to listen, if any of those people are left, as you said, if they haven't been alienated.
Yeah, they're all gone.
Is part of it, if you get beyond the grift and the money, insinuated this, that it's like the sense of purpose, right?
Yes.
Is part of it this idea, to borrow a quote from the musical Hamilton, they want to be in the room where it happened.
Yes.
And
that's
the idea
perfect.
of being in the room where it happens, that supersedes everything else. And so ethics, morals, just common sense, logic all goes out the door because it becomes relevance at that point.
Yeah. It's sad to watch this group of people. And Sidney Powell, at one time, didn't she work for the DOJ? She was a respected attorney.
I think so, yeah.
John Eastman has been a famed conservative academic for most of his career. It's not only that these people are facing, they're facing the loss of their reputation, the end of whatever professional career, but now they're also facing potentially loss of their freedom. And for what? And for whom?
And they are going to be footnotes in history in a completely negative light. I mean, their role in history is going to be forever shaped by this.
So Rudy's already said, I'm out of cash. Jenna Ellis has set up a GoFundMe to try to
Mark
get
Levin
big.
has been hawking that, if you've noticed on
I got to
Twitter.
think Sidney Powell doesn't have, she can't have a ton of money left after all of this.
And I mean, most of these people, there's also proceedings actively to disbar them or remove their law licenses too.
Yeah, I think it's called the 65 Project, where a group of lawyers are going after the 65 lawyers that were involved with Trump's thing. So.
I know Giuliani and Sidney Powell both have active cases against them.
I feel sorry for the 30 unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators that are at the state level. Because in that group, I'm imagine, is one or two people who just volunteered for something, thinking this was a way to get involved. They got caught up in the Trump excitement. To your point, that phenomenon of I'm in the room with the big dogs when it's happening, those people are all going to flip.
Oh, yeah.
They're just going to tell
Completely.
Bonnie Willis, just whatever you want, you have.
And that's the whole
I'm
strategy.
not going home and telling my wife I may be going to jail.
Right. And that's the whole strategy behind having 30 unindicted co-conspirators is you start to build that momentum to flipping them and expanding your case. So without a doubt.
Very early on a pod, I think this was a podcast even with Mike and I believe that I said one of the most probable outcomes for Trump's presidency was him going to jail. And I thought that simply because the presidency is one of the most complicated jobs in the world, and you are open to legal exposure almost on a daily basis. I mean, if you run the DOJ, all of the three-letter agencies that gather intelligence, the military, the FBI, all of the ag department, all of that, you're opening yourself up to legal liability on all fronts every day. Donald Trump simply didn't have the complexity in his background to be able to recognize it, understand that, and listen to enough people to navigate it. In some ways, this was the place we were always going to end up. I just thought he'd just steal. I just thought he'd just say, well, I'm the CEO of the United States. That's mine. I'm just taking it.
He also simply didn't care. You also have to realize Trump's entire career has been marked by just barely escaping justice. I mean, he has flirted with illegality his entire life and has been able to evade accountability via the court system and the law, and just using
on the civil side.
On the civil side, yes.
Yeah.
So he has, I think, built over time this persona that he was untouchable, and I think he acts like that as well. And if you follow anybody who operates from that level of hubris, they start to believe they are invincible, and they take more and more risk in time. And so Trump was only going to take more risk, and it was only a matter of time before that would catch up with him.
And what's interesting to me is I have heard people talk about Donald Trump for 7 years. And I've heard people talk about these legal cases for 2.5 years. Brandon, we're probably 6-7 months away from seeing how the people, how a jury, how 12 Americans react to this.
That's what's so amazing. And that brings me back to the Georgia case. Because this is a state case, it will certainly be televised. And we're going to see something we haven't seen since, I think, the O.J. Simpson trial in terms of viewership and just the buzz around this. Because this will be televised. Federal trials usually are not televised except with special exception. But this will be televised. Everybody will be watching. Now, it's interesting. Fani Willis has asked for a trial start date of like March 4th, I believe. Yeah. And she is trying all of Trump and the co-conspirators together, which is a big undertaking. So it remains to be seen if that trial date will hold or whether she will continue to try them all at once or try to separate them, because it is a gargantuan task. But if you think about that, March 4th projected trial date, you have the Mar-a-Lago documents.
Super Tuesday, too, by the way.
What's that?
That's Super Tuesday, too.
My gosh. Do
you think she did that on purpose?
I did not even consider that.
I think she did.
I think so, too. Yeah. You have May 20th, which is the date that was set by the judge for the Mar-a-Lago case. And then Jack Smith has asked for January 4th as the start date for the January 6th case. So you're going to have these cases ultimately overlap, but it'll be interesting to watch the timeline because we could see trial starting pretty soon after the new year in January with at least one of the cases, and then another case to follow in 6 weeks' time.
Here's a quick way to know if the person you're listening to is dealing with you in good faith about trials and dates and timelines. So folks like Brian Kilmeade, another host on Fox, are just like, oh my God, just delay all these till after the election. This isn't fair. Just delay these. People delay all the time. In civil court, you do.
Yeah.
Civil court can go on for years. The average criminal case, felony, from time charge to trial date is 90 to 180 days, 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Great point.
The acceptable amount of time to delay a felony trial. There is no set rule, but what I was able to find is that most courts set on 8 months. 8 months is the absolute longest delay. They will delay a criminal trial, and you better have a damn good reason to do it. So the first thing is if anybody comes up and says, oh, my God, they should delay these. They do this all the time. No, you need to turn that person off, find another podcast, find another channel. That is 100% wrong.
Right.
And second, if they're centering you around, well, we talked about First Amendment issues. This is another thing. This is not what these are about.
This is about the action
Correct.
taken. Yeah.
That person's taking a lazy approach to giving you information, mostly probably to promote one side or the other, which is really all we're going to get until the trials start. But we are going to get to a point where how easy is it going to be to improve intent to 12 Americans that Trump actually knew he didn't win the election? I think that'll take all of 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be a problem. It'll be interesting. How do people react when all of this evidence comes out? Because again, the indictment is not the evidence. We haven't even begun to get into everything that they've got. And then how do juries handle this? And I think the juries will come back quickly, and I think they'll come back mostly convicted.
I agree. And I think, and that's because of the surplus of evidence we have. We have recordings. We have these people in their own words and writing and audio on video. I mean, none of this was kept, secret or to the vest. So I think that's what makes this case very problematic for Trump. And I found it amusing that Trump's lawyers are trying to get him to back off next Monday's press conference where he introduces the...
This is the shit show we're here for.
So Trump had announced the next Monday he was going to show just how the election in Georgia was stolen. And, of course, his attorneys, sensing, jeopardy for him on the legal side, said, no, you don't want to do this.
I think they all told him we're going to quit.
Right. Yeah. And so it would just be... I was actually talking with somebody the other day. I'm like, so are we taking any bets for how many of his legal team leave or get changed out before the trial actually starts?
None of them will make it.
I don't know that any of them will make it all the way.
I don't. Yeah. If there's one thing with Trump's lawyers, don't get used to them because there'll be a whole different set very, very quickly.
Right.
So most of the pundits, when they talk about this, they talk about it in the language of what's going to happen on appeal. This is Dershowitz's big thing is, there's not a lot that can happen in the state courts. These are all unfriendly juries. Oh, by the way, if you're listening to anybody that puts any relevancy into who voted for whom as what the venue should be, you should turn off that immediately because none of that thing, that's all just absolutely friggin' ridiculous. Brandon, I was pointing that out. I went on a journey and I lost my point. What was I talking about?
So, you had mentioned Alan Dershowitz talking about the appeals that would take place. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That there seems to be a consensus building among the conservative lawyer crowd. And I don't know if this is all in good faith or if this is just all just spinning for clicks and eyeballs, but there is a real possibility that Trump may be convicted of a lot of this in these courts, and this could this could get appealed. Big chunks of this could get appealed, and he could win on appeal. The Supreme Court is taking a very, very narrow view of what fraud is, and they are getting rid of, and they just had a whole series of decisions where they basically said fraud is about property or money, period. You cannot people have been convicted because Manafort, for example.
Yeah.
The baseline of his fraud was he defrauded the government out of the ability to keep an active list of FARA people. That's dumb and that's stupid. This is what the court is narrowing down. All I'm doing is trying to prep people for once, let's say he gets convicted in 3 of these 4 cases, which we think he will, that does not mean these cases are going to stand on appeal. And then that brings us to a really interesting question. Do you think John Roberts, if it's a 4-4, do you think he'll overturn the will of the people and throw out Trump's conviction? This is a man who voted to keep Obamacare because he did not want the legacy of the court to be, we kicked out a law that the government passed. So all I'm saying to folks
it would be hard pressed for me to see
because
Roberts would vote to, again, his caution and the reputation of the court is what he's concerned about.
Yeah.
I am also, while I agree with you, I'm still skeptical that the court would take up these cases because they are a political landmine. And this far surpasses what we saw with Bush v. Gore, which was heavily criticized. I mean, this is like unknown territory. So if you are the court and you care about relevance and long-term reputation, this is the last set of cases you would want to take up, I think, out of everything. So I'm not convinced ultimately at the end of the day that there would be a consensus for them to take this up. I don't.
I would love for all 9 justices to give a press conference and just stand there and say, this is a political mess that we are not cleaning up for you.
Yeah, agreed.
Clearly, this is to be handled in the political realm. We are not stepping into this. Don't ask again.
They would and if they were to overturn these cases, they would just be seen as basically coming to Trump's aid. It would be completely political. And, usurping, the arm of justice. And so it would set a very bad precedent. And it would also, I think, if you look on the political side, you would see the escalation among Democrats to change the makeup of the court and to reform the court.
So.
That would be sky high at that point. And that would become a litmus test for every Democrat running for federal office at that point. So,
Brandon, I don't believe in the Illuminati, but I do believe, like, Senator's office, like Senator Jerry Moran, that maybe there are little groups of people that get together and maybe have rational discussions together.
Yeah, I think
like
that's
John Roberts
rational,
and some people to say, hey, we are not going to step into this. I think people can get together before things happen maybe and talk about what's the best possible outcome. What are you planning on doing? What am I planning on doing? If that does happen, boy, this seems like it'd be a really good time for some people behind the scenes to get their shit together and try to help the whole country get through this as quickly and as painlessly as we can.
I agree. And I mean, even to back up for a moment, assuming that Trump gets convicted in one or more of these trials on a handful of charges, we could very well be going into a June Republican National Convention where the front runner has just been convicted in one of these venues. And so the question is there a floor fight to, basically select a different nominee? Is there chaos? What happens at that point? I mean, it could be a free-for-all.
So this is good heading into this first debate next week, which God knows what this is going to be. Brandon, there is no incentive structure for anyone to drop out. No. I mean, if I'm DeSantis or Haley or Christie, I'm just going to ride as long as I can, pick up as many delegates as I can, because you just mentioned the convention. There's at least a shot that could be an open convention, that we could go in not knowing what happens, and the nominee gets picked at the convention.
And you better believe that all of the candidates have that at the back of their minds.
Nobody's dropping out on this.
No.
Nobody is dropping out until the convention, and we may get to the point where it gets decided there. God, that would be so awesome.
I think that's very likely. I mean, talk about high-stakes drama. We have not had a legitimate convention fight in, oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, probably, 50 years?
And who was the last
Was there a fight on the convention between Carter and Ted Kennedy?
There was a little bit, but Ted Kennedy pretty much shot his wad by that point, and everybody knew it was Carter. Kennedy is the one who he was the last one, I think, who made a serious push to primary.
He did make a serious
president.
bid,
yeah.
and so, you'd have to go back much further.
I can't. It's got to be one of those 1800,
or early 1900s
Taft ones or some shit like that. But
it's been a while.
Well, like the press conference on Monday, we're in silly season.
Oh,
Let's
it's uncharted
be
territory.
Silly. Let's be silly. If nobody knows what we're doing and we're all acting like lunatics, let's be as big a lunatics as we can be.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Lindell, Brandon, is right across the state in St. Louis having another one of his change the world, the 2020 election moments. I mean,
I saw that.
If we're still doing that, let's get really crazy. Let's hit every note. Let Trump give his thing. I mean, let's get this party started. If we're going to burn ourselves down over this election cycle, let's get the fire started and let's just get to it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, Trump is not going to be quiet through all this at all. So I'm also waiting to see, if there's any consequence for him continuing to spout off and influence jurors and intimidate.
Let me ask you a series of quick questions because I want to get your opinions on these. So, number one, do you agree with the judge in the J6 case who told Trump, I don't give a shit that you're running for president. Your schedule doesn't mean anything to me, and I will not consider it one time when putting this calendar together?
Oh, completely. I mean, political campaign schedules should not, supersede, standard court proceedings at all.
So you agree with her that, hey, just because you're running for election, that doesn't mean shit.
I totally agree. That would be special treatment.
I owe you no responsibility to that. You're a former president and the current leader of the Republican Party. You get no special treatment here.
It doesn't matter. A physician who's on trial doesn't get coordination with his, patient schedule. I mean, it would account for anybody in any other profession. They don't get special treatment like that.
Who wins in the Trump mugshot? Does Trump need it more or does Georgia need it more?
I
mean, Brandon,
Georgia, I think, needs it more. By the way, there's a lot of anti-Trumpers who are already talking about they want to get that on a T-shirt. So you can bet that those T-shirts are going to be flying off.
I'm buying it.
Yeah.
So you think that? Well, one, I think it's already been decided. He's getting fingerprinted, mugshotted, the whole bit. And they said while they're doing that, the other 18, they may have to sit in the holding tank with everybody else while this happens. Is that too far? Is that too much? There is an element. I mean, the right is getting really pissed. And when Hillary Clinton trolled them on Rachel Maddow's show, that may have been a breaking point for some of these folks. Do we have to do all that? I understand this is
I think we do.
Thing,
I don't think we should placate Trump supporters and try to make them feel less enraged or incensed about the court cases proceeding. And so, no, any person, normal person, who is charged with a crime like this would go through and be fingerprinted and have a mugshot taken. So, again, just because he's a former president, why should he be treated any differently? Or why should he be given special treatment just as, to calm people down? Like, no, at the end of the day, we have to, I think, ensure that everybody abides by the same laws and the same proceedings. And I would not argue that he, get any type of special treatment at all.
Does Trump keep himself out of jail while waiting all these trials, or does his behavior just become too lunatic?
Oh, that's
and they're
unknown.
Forced to do something?
I think it could devolve and become very lunatic, where they're forced to slap him down with some jail time or something, even if it's just a day or 24 hours or less, because he has not shown a propensity to control himself. He does not control himself. He does not listen to anybody. He is continuing to ramble and go after the judge and others. He attacked Fonnie Willis the other day with a slanderous accusation.
That she had an affair with a gang member?
Right, yeah. And so, so that's his MO. And I think that we also have to be cautious because the more he speaks, the more that there's things and events that happen underneath him. There was a Trump supporter that issued a threat against a judge in the January 6th case, very nasty, actually, threat to kill, who's been arrested. There's a Trump website that posted the names and addresses of the jurors in the Fulton County case.
Yeah.
Again, that's a security breach. And so, and it just also points to the fact that we need to step up security efforts for the judges, the attorneys, and the jurors in all these cases. So that will continue to escalate as long as Trump keeps speaking. So I think at some point, if he continues to show complete disregard for the rules of the court, he'll have to be punished.
Yeah, we used to live next to a U.S. Marshal, and I can tell you, you don't want to threaten a federal judge. They take that really, really seriously. And
As they should.
I guess if you're going to do it, don't just call up the federal courthouse and leave a message for her either that you're going to kill her. That you might be pretty easy to find if you do something like that. I have been somewhat surprised that we have not had any real Trump protest. There's been nobody in the streets. There was nobody at the courthouse in Georgia. There's nobody burning anything down because Trump's been indicted 4 times.
That's true, although they did establish a security perimeter around the Georgia courthouse.
It was unneeded.
Right.
There's nobody there. Well, they did it at 11 o'clock at night.
And so I also wonder, too, and this brings me back to the prosecutions of the January 6th defendants. I think that has also created an environment where many who would likely be in the streets are not, because they're afraid of things getting out of hand and then being part of that. So if there's anything good to say, I think that the Justice Department going after the 1,200 or so who have faced charges from January 6th, that has sent a pretty clear message to others who would cause trouble. But, and again, I would say it's still early on. There's, you're going to see a lot of politicians fan the flames and continue on with their two-tier justice mantras. And as we get closer and closer to trial dates, there's a lot that could still happen. Yeah. I have a very dark mood. I do not see us from this point going from now to November 2024 without there being a violent incident. Yeah. I hope I'm wrong, but I just have this feeling in the back of my mind that, again, all it takes is for one or a handful of people to step out of line, and you have an incident where people can get hurt, or there's violent altercation. And I feel like it's inevitable because I don't see the rhetoric getting controlled, or people controlling what they're saying. And
we might be at the high watermark of this whole thing, Brandon.
I think that's probably accurate.
64% of Americans in a recent survey said there was no goddamn way, or close to no goddamn way, they would ever vote for Trump.
I just saw this poll. I'm glad you brought this up. And that's the number that Republicans should be worried about.
Some of these numbers are slowly starting to penetrate into that kind of right-wing entertainment bubble.
Yeah.
And part of the folks that are in that bubble are starting to realize we're in a bubble, that maybe they're just getting a feedback loop on Trump that really isn't telling the true picture. I think those numbers were a real shock to a lot of people. I also think that might be Trump's best mark, 63%, and I think we'll see that rise.
Oh, yeah, because this is just the beginning, right? As more comes out, as the televised trial takes shape, you're going to see more detail. And then if you were to get a conviction, you're talking about a convicted felon. I think that changes automatically the opinions of so many people, because it's one thing to be accused, it's another to be convicted.
Well, only 74% of Republicans now say they are locked in to vote for Trump. So he's even losing. That used to be in the high 90s. So, he's losing some ground, too, with his own base.
I agree, but this is the dilemma for the Republican Party, that the way that the primary calendar is set up, it completely favors Trump, and with the turnout models for those primaries and caucuses. So despite all of that, as we get into early next year, he, again, even with all of this going on, is still well-positioned to win the nomination, but then to lose the general. And there doesn't really seem to be a plan or stopgap to that.
No. There seems to be no recognition by Republicans, I guess that I can say that broadly, that this is going to hurt Trump. They are still in that every indictment makes him stronger phase. And that's true until it doesn't. Right. All these indictments make him stronger now because we haven't seen him appear in a court. We haven't gone through discovery. We haven't seen any witness lists, and nobody has come out and flipped. When all of that happens, it's going to be a very different scenario.
And party leaders, electeds, they've had ample opportunity to turn on Trump to start to veer away. They haven't. And so the mindset seems to be, we're just going to hope that he dies or that he's convicted beforehand, and then we can have a convention fight. The problem is that does nothing in the interim to change the primary and caucus outcomes. And it's getting to be too close to the dates to see any kind of drastic seismic shift and movement of support. Like if Republicans had wanted to change that outcome, they would have had to be on message, start talking about with a unified voice that we need to move away from Trump.
There
and that
is
should
no
have started
pivot.
last year. They haven't done that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even if tomorrow there was some, they somehow altogether pivoted away, like it's almost like there's still not enough time left to change.
Hey, Glenn
what's
Youngkin
inevitable.
ain't parachuting in to save you at this point.
No.
That's not going to happen. Talking about Republicans parachuting places, I don't think that's a good segue, but we have our first debate of the 2024 presidential election is next Wednesday on Fox.
That still didn't sink in fully until you mentioned it just
Somebody
a while ago.
on Fox, I was listening to Fox today, and they were like, when I look at the massive amount of talent on that stage, that these are serious. I'm like, good Lord, there's not a lot of political talent on that stage.
I am very excited to see Christie tear apart Trump. Chris Christie, by the way, has overtaken Ron DeSantis in some polls in New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire.
Yeah.
If I'm Chris Christie, first thing I do is walk out and just take my shirt off. Just let everybody know I am here to dominate. I don't give a shit. And I am your destructor. I'm coming right at everybody. I'm going to look around and say, hey, since Trump ain't here, it's you, DeSantis. Let's go.
Well, and I think we have spoken in the past about how it would be conducive for all of the candidates to go after DeSantis in place of Trump not being there, especially now that we know that DeSantis's debate plans have leaked online.
God,
and
that's
so
when you know it's going bad.
We know the details of what they're going to do. Basically, those plans included going after Vivek Ramaswamy for being fake and not being legitimate, pushing back against Chris Christie, defending Trump all the way, humanizing himself by telling feel-good stories about his wife and kids.
Great.
And the fact that every campaign has a blue book for debate prep, but to put that out there, because DeSantis is already vulnerable for being too stiff, for being too robotic, not likable. There's that famous incident in his gubernatorial race where it somehow got leaked that he had a little palm card where he had wrote what did he write on it? It was like
be likable or
be
something,
likable,
be relatable or something.
It was
like
likable.
That.
It was be likable, like to remind himself to be likable. And again, that just plays into the notion that this guy is awkward, that he's not he's stiff, he doesn't really empathize well or with people, and the fact that it's leaked that he had to be told to humanize himself, I think is just it's interesting. You will see some PACs will leak information that is supposed to be strategic.
That had to come from DeSantis' staff, didn't it?
Well, I think so, yeah. But that's the part that I don't understand. They leaked a lot. I mean, they leaked a lot of detail that is kind of cringy. Like, why would you want that leaked before the debate?
They don't like him. His own staff doesn't like him?
It must be. And it opens him up to further lines of attack by his opponents at the debate.
If I'm Chris Christie, I said this last week, I'll say it again. I walk out online and say, listen, there's two people on this stage running for president, me and that butthole from Florida down there. The rest of these people are a joke. Nobody here is running for president. Vivek's running for a cabinet spot. Nikki's running for VP. Tim's running for VP. And I can tell you that because, again, she asked permission. He won't say nothing, and this is his first campaign.
That would be
anything those three talk about, I don't give a shit, and I don't care. Because they're not serious and they're not here. Let's get to it. That's what I would just come out and just be, hey, you guys seem to think you like an asshole. Let me show you a world-class one. Yeah. That orange guy, he's just a douche. Let me show you how you really... Chris Christie knows how to wield political power in an asshole way.
Oh, yeah.
And he has nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose for it. And if I'm Chris Christie, or any of the candidates for that matter, if DeSantis comes after me, my ultimate comeback is, was that on your note card? One of the bullet points for your debate prep?
Hey, did somebody tell you that?
Right.
Hey, Ron, why don't you just laugh for us? Can you do that? No. Look, your mouth's open. You look like a Pez dispenser.
Remember, Ron, be likable. Come on.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, you're not being very likable, Ron. Vivek Ramaswamy, it's going to be interesting because everyone's going to turn their fire at that guy.
Because
he's gone viral a few points. And
he's overtaken DeSantis in
Vivek's
Iowa.
a guy. He's got a shtick. He's pretty articulate. He handled the LBGTQ question in Iowa very well.
He did handle that very well.
It's not like he's without skill. But if you get 4 or 5 people that are professional, lifelong politicians aim their fire at you, that can be a lot.
And I think that they can effectively do so. This was in DeSantis' debate prep, but it is accurate. Vivek opens himself up to being inauthentic because he doesn't have a background or extensive history in GOP politics. And not only that, his background on the issues is actually fairly liberal until he made the pivot and decided he wanted to run for president.
Vivek Ramaswamy is not a Republican in any way, shape, or form.
He is playing the game.
He's cosplaying in politics.
Trying to be more MAGA than Trump.
Correct.
He's checking all the boxes.
He's hoping for a cabinet position and go from there. It's not. He's not serious.
No, not at all.
And rapping "Lose Yourself" at the Iowa, that's not something that a Republican. If he were up 20 points, he never would have done. Never would have done that.
He is amusing more than anything, and that's the kind of the role he's playing. I mean, he's more akin to, if you look at past campaigns, somebody like Herman Cain or someone who, what was his tax plan?
It's like the 5-point plan and no bill over 3 pages, so you could read it at the kitchen table.
But there was it was like a number repeated, like 555 or
you're right. He had like the 555 plan, like 5% of this, 5 of that, or something. Oh, Herman died of COVID because he went to Trump's rally in Tulsa. God, just thinking back to all of the insanity that's happened the last 5 years. And there's one fat orange bastard right at the
center of
all
of it. Yeah.
And we can't quit this guy.
One person who we cannot move away from. And again, the Republican hopes seem to be that they just hope this guy keels over. I mean, that's their because they won't go after him.
Is there any opportunity for anyone to have a breakout moment? I mean, somebody goes from single digits to 20-25%.
I think it is possible just because Trump has such a large insurmountable margin, but all of the rest of them are pretty close together, especially you get after number 2 and DeSantis. They're all within a point or two of each other. Yeah. I mean, especially the ones in the single digits. So I think one of them could have a breakout and then rise to number 2 or number 3. I don't see any of them overtaking Trump, who won't even be there, but you could see movement in that tier far below Trump based on what happens in debates.
The worst thing I think for the Republican Party is that everything holds after the debate. It changes nothing.
At all. It's static.
Then you have another one, and you get the exact same results.
So nobody comes out of it with any momentum. It's kind of like, it's stagnant. So
what the Republican Party says, we don't like any of these people on stage.
Stalemate,
we've already said we don't like any of them, and this guy is unworkable.
Right.
Odds Donald Trump doesn't get the nomination, takes his 35% of the party, and goes home. I think that's our most logical outcome right now.
Yeah.
Let's end real quick. We're kind of a little short tonight because, Brandon, you actually have to work tonight.
Yeah, I do. I have a little bit of a code deployment that I have to join a little bit later tonight.
How many times have you said little code deployment at 4 a.m.? You're just sitting there on the phone like, we're never going to get this. We're never going to get this.
I have a lot of stories in my old job. Pertaining to that.
When I worked at Sprint being on call, you could just sit there for days.
Well, and especially after I do my part, but I'm stuck on there as I'm waiting on other people. I'm just kind of audio off, just in the background. Okay.
So let's talk about, I think we may have even done this every time Trump's been indicted. What do we think the outcome of the indictment is in Georgia?
As far as what are we looking at in terms of impact?
It could be he gets totally off.
He
gets convicted of some. He gets convicted of all. What do we think is the final outcome?
I do think he definitely gets convicted of some. I do not think his lawyers will be successful in having the case remanded to federal court. That's very unlikely.
Yeah.
It almost never happens. So, yes, I think he will get convicted of some of these charges, and I think the outcome will be that he gets jail time out of the Georgia case.
So you think he's going to spend some time in jail off of Georgia?
I do, yeah. I think, eventually that's going to be the outcome.
Could you live with an outcome that Trump is convicted of most of these charges? Let's say some of them are kicked out by the Supreme Court, not all of them, and he gets some sort of house imprisonment in Mar-a-Lago where he wears a ankle bracelet, can't get on social media, and has to stay within 10 miles of Mar-a-Lago. Would that be an acceptable outcome to you at the end of all of this?
It would be more acceptable than not, especially if it ensures that he cannot become president. But I mean, there's still a part of me that really wants to see him behind bars and face that as an ultimate punishment. And I think that's what makes this so difficult. If we were talking about just one case, I could see that scenario playing out. But because we're talking about 4 different cases simultaneously, and the juggernaut of there's no way I think the Supreme Court would take up all of these cases if they do take any of them up.
No.
Which, again, I'm still skeptical they take any of them up. But if they do, they're not going to take up all 4.
Roberts is not going to take one of these up just to make sure it's a 5-4.
So I think that, again, the likelihood there with all of the balls that are in play is that he gets some jail time. How much is an open question, but it's hard for me to see a scenario where he doesn't get any.
So last question. Can you be ultimately satisfied that Trump received justice and this was fair and this is what America needed if Trump never goes to jail? Does he have to go to jail for you to feel that, hey, this was done correctly? Because I'm using you as an avatar for 40% of the country, because I'm in that side too, and this is what I'm struggling with. Does he have to go to jail to feel like, hey, justice has been served?
I struggle with that because house arrest is one thing. I don't think fines do it.
Fines, I don't give it. Yeah, he'll just steal it. He'll just grift off people to pay it.
Right, and so he won't ever be personally accountable when it comes to something like that.
And I'm past Trump's ever going to learn anything. And he's fucking 78, 80 years old. I mean,
house arrest in Mar-a-Lago is like a permanent vacation, right? I mean, he can continue golfing. He can do whatever
There's no way we're sending Trump to some federal prison, are we? There's just no way that's going to happen.
Well, maybe Fulton County.
Even for me, that's a bridge too far.
I don't think so. I think for me, I would really like to see him go to prison if it's warranted. And again, if you look at all these cases, they're all unique. But if you look at RICO statutes, if you look at others that have taken intelligence and resisted getting them back, they've all spent some time in prison.
Yeah.
The
great part is we're going to find out. We're going to find out pretty quickly too.
We will.
So
next year is going to be a very interesting blockbuster year.
Joe Biden is not running for president. There's just no way. Did you hear him get the bridge confused and told the wrong story?
I didn't hear this.
He does this so much. It's 6 or 8 months until the camp. He's not running for president. You could look at him. I don't know who is, but it's not going to be Joe Biden. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Again, I don't know how he has the wherewithal to actually run a race across the country. He did not have to in 2020 with COVID. This year,
I would make the agreement with the Republicans. We'll go into the convention too with no candidate, and we'll pick ours if you commit to doing the same thing. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Not going to happen at all. No. I think what would be, again, most likely to happen, and maybe you and I have talked about this or just been on my mind a lot because people have asked me recently, is that before Election Day, he picks a new VP running mate.
Carrie Lake?
Kamala Harris is given a different role within the administration.
Oh, you're talking about Biden.
I'm talking about Biden.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then that shakes things up, but it also provides reassurance to those who don't think Biden will serve out a full term.
Maybe Newsom runs for VP.
That could be, Newsom. Gretchen Whitmer would make a great VP. She's been reelected now as governor of Michigan.
Polis out of Colorado.
I love Jared Polis out of Colorado.
There's
moderate
centrist
Dem. Amy Klobuchar.
We just have to convince. We just have to let the Trump era pass to maybe we can convince some of those types of people on both sides to get back into politics.
Yeah, I think it'll eventually happen. Yeah, we're in a place right now where the rational people are taking a hiatus. They don't want to go into this. Why would they?
Nope. That's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.